Okay. Okay, everybody. Just want to make sure that you can hear me. So in the right side of the screen, if you will say hello, yeah, I can see you, I can hear you. And then we'll have a thumbs up for technology working again for the betterment of our health, of our lives, and of our endless search for knowledge, right? So go ahead and go over there to the right side. Let's see. Go ahead and click on okay. We should be ready to go. Just let me know that we're all ready, and I think we'll be ready. You know, while we're getting started, people have asked, what is this scar? It actually starts down here. Thanks, Jess, for hearing me. And it comes clear up here and up to about right there on my chin. That one about did me in. That cut almost, the actual scar goes in and then it cut to the left and almost cut the jugular. Yeah, nasty. I did that when I was about, man, how old was I? 8, 9-ish. We were on our farm. Calf got out. It was time to milk the cows and feed the calves. And one of these calves got out. You know, calves, crazy animals as they are, went running into one part of our yard and our farm. Just had broken equipment and fences that had been partially tore down. And he was running out there. It's dusk, so it was just where you could see. But you know how that time at dusk where you can't really see depth very well, colors and all. And I'm running along after this calf, and I want to catch him because he's going to hurt himself. And I remember thinking, I play in this all the time. I know there's this barbed wire fence that just has one. Right when I thought that, I ran right into it. Barbed wire fence caught me, spun me up, landed on my back. Oh man, yeah, it was an awful mess. So, but I'm here. I made it, and we're all ready to go. All right, looks like people can hear me. Let's get started on the presentation. We have some good stuff to go with. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what inspired. I'm going to turn my phone off while we're at it. What inspired this presentation? I do a lot of science. Just to give you a little bit of background, I'm a food scientist that specializes in the treatment of metabolic syndrome and chronic disease. I have spent the last 11 years doing that. I have read, I can't even tell you, 100, probably close to 1,000 clinical studies now on this particular topic. And I'm it fascinates me. I'm very well read in it. Always reading new emerging technologies and discoveries. And I pride myself, or should I say, I take the responsibility of being very clinically based, wanting to make sure that what we're providing, the information I'm providing you is correct and accurate, that our formulas and our products really do what they say. So we released a new version of one of our products, our smart food products. And there's somebody on the internet that came out and just lambasted it. And so that's what inspired this presentation. Said it was a bunch of hogwash. So I'm in response of that. So hopefully you can see this, and we are rock and roll and ready to go. I mean, how do I get rid of that darn screen? I forget every time I go on. You might have to just look at my face the whole time. I think we're ready to go. I think we're recording. Let's get started on this presentation. It's a top. I titled this one "A New Fiber Can Block fats and carbohydrates from being digested," right? And it's really not all that new, actually. So let's go into the start of this. And I'm going to pull this up on, I'm kind of high tech here, I guess. I got 3 huge screens that I use because I have so many documents open at the same time, and it helps me stay focused on what I'm trying to do. So I'm sorry this is taking, when I got all these screens going, sometimes I get a little convoluted. Okay. So let's, what is the physical nature of our nation's health? Sadly, it is, well, this picture. This picture shows that the blue states are those that have 0 to 10% of the people that are obese. Now remember, what's the definition of obesity? Having a body mass index of 30 or above. Now, I don't like the body mass index as a general measurement of how much you should weigh. It's fading now. And last day will never come too soon for me. It's just taking both men and women, putting them on the same chart, their height by their weight, and that's your BMI. And it's bad. Doesn't take into effect the difference between male and female, doesn't take into effect additional muscle density, which will drastically change that. However, it's another definition I like better is obesity are those people that are 30 pounds or more over their ideal weight. Okay. And that's better. It's not absolutely clarified. I like body fat percentages much better, but at least it gives us a much better picture. And look at all the blue states on this graph of those that have 0 to 10% of their population being obese. There's none. There's no states. And look at the green states. That's the people that are 10% to 15%. Yeah, there's none of those either. And then we go into the kind of the lime greenish states, 15 to 19.9. None. Oh, this is not good. And then you get into the yellow. So you have Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana. You got New Hampshire up there, and or I guess I should say New York. That's 20 to 25%. And then all the red states are those that are 30 to 35% of their population is obese. This graph is actually an older graph. The World Health Organization has come out and told us that those numbers are even worse. So that's not good. Nearly 80% of Americans are overweight. Now, overweight and obesity are just something different, right? So 80% are overweight. And those that are 62 years old and older have at least 2 chronic diseases. That's not good at all. Over half of the world, so let's just say the half on the left side, are insulin resistant, making it the most prevalent chronic health risk that we have. And type 2 diabetes will plague over half of the adults by year 2025. That's not so far away. That's right around the corner. And the cost to treat diabetes will be more than all the expense of all the other chronic diseases combined. Those are just a few bleak facts of chronic conditions. And there's many, many more. Studies have confirmed that they are not caused by a new virus or a genetic change in the human genome. It's caused by food, right? Food is the cause. even including what we think is healthy foods. But thankfully, food can also save us. It has to save us. And that's why we're here. That's why we're here to, our mission is to create functional foods using the latest cutting edge science. Our foods are designed to satisfy your palate, feed your body, and be one of the tools in your battle against chronic disease. Now, when I say functional foods, that's what I mean is it does more than just feed you. It does other things for you. It gives you a leverage tool, a power tool to get you healthier or closer to your health goals, right? So food is why we are sick. And I believe that food can literally heal us. Now, you'll never hear us promise a cure of a chronic disease, but we do promise that we'll provide you the latest research. We'll give you good, solid research. We'll provide you wholesome foods that have all natural ingredients, right? And give you the foods that you want to eat, right? It's important to note that we've never made the claim that our food doesn't have any fats or carbohydrates in our recipes. Our claim is founded in reliable scientific evidence that once you consume it, the fats and carbohydrates cannot be completely digested. That's all we're saying. And this is where some people just come out and go, that's hogwash. It's preposterous. It can't happen, right? Well, if it can happen, the end game, the goal, if you will, our ultimate goal is to provide you with tools to help you maintain a healthy level of insulin. Now, you've heard me talk about, I don't know, if you've been with me since the beginning, I do these webinars every week. I've talked about, probably 150 different topics, right? We talk about a lot of things, but really, if you were to sum it all up into what am I really talking about? What is it that's my main goal, the point that I want to get across? That you have to keep your insulin levels low. That's it. Healthy level of insulin, keep them lower, will be the best tool for you having ultimate health. That is your absolute number one goal. There's all kinds of other things that we can do to heighten it, to give us, that edge. But if you want the secret recipe, if you boil it down to one simple thing, it's keeping your insulin levels low, right? That's where the action is. And that's why you see me showing this chart over and over again. I don't have anything against carbohydrates, for heaven's sakes. I love the darn things. It's just that we eat too many of those things to give us low insulin levels, right? So let's get into the science. The science that I'm going to talk about of how in the world we are able to get foods that taste delicious, our formulas be effective while we're blocking these carbs and fats. So while they're low insulin producing foods, how are we able to do it? And what science are we using in that process? All right. It's all based on 35 years of proven science. Not our 35 years, because we've only been around for 11, but it's going back. It's a proven technology that the digestion of carbohydrates and fats can be modified by what is called a oleosaccharide cyclodextrin, right? Now, we use a slightly different version, and I'll explain a little bit later why. We use a clomohexamylose cyclodextrin because we have to bake it in our food. And without going into a lot of science right now, I'll tell you why. We had to make some changes. It kind of gives us the edge over some of the other competition. But this, you can classify cyclodextrin as a fiber. It's in the fiber class. It's well established, dating way back to 1983, that cyclodextrin molecules can bind and hold onto several different types of substances, such as fats and carbohydrates. Okay, cyclodextrins have been and are still today used in food, in medicine, prescription medications, personal hygiene like medication, lotions and potions and skincare, and hundreds of industrial applications besides what we now. They're different forms, right? But that standard form of cyclodextrin needs to be changed. We needed more power, right? So those of you that are Star Trek fans, we need more power to get us out of this jam. And the reason why is because most all fibers can bind temporarily at a 1-to-1 up to about 1 to 1.4, maybe 1.5 times its weight. Now, that makes it really, really impractical for you and I. Let's say we want to block some carbs or block some fiber. So we're gonna go have some fried chicken. It's gonna have 100 grams of fat in it, all right, and or more. Well, we would have to eat 100 grams of fiber. Do you know how much that is? That's a ton. That's like 45 rolls, today's rolls, to be able to get that kind of fiber to block or to inhibit, to slow down the digestion of that fat. It's just not practical. We can't do it, right? So that's why we needed more power. Now, this is a little bit of a fuzzy view of molecularly what a cyclodextrin molecule looks like, all right? Chemically, for those that are there are chemical engineers out there, or remember some of your biochemistry classes, it can be created by enzymatic means from a starch of raw materials like corn or potatoes, right? So it can be created by enzymes and then a cyclodextrin. So it's a naturally occurring fiber. Primarily we use corn because it's more readily available, and it is a polysaccharide, as I mentioned, right? And it has these links. These links will adhere to water. It'll adhere to what is called a truncated cone. That's what that little purple thing is. And what this means in science is that it's hydrophilic, all right, on the outside and or on the inside of the cone, and it's hydrophobic on the outside. That means that it repels on the outside and it sucks on the inside. And that's good because what it does is then it will bond to the things that we want to prescribe it to. In our case, we want it to bond to carbohydrates. Which is a carbohydrate is hydrophilic, a water-based molecule, because 4 water molecules will go and bond to it every time you eat a carbohydrate. That's broken down into glucose, and then 4 water molecules go and they bond to that carbohydrate. That's why when you go to eat something that has a lot of carbs in it, let's say you're going to eat Chinese food, tons of carbs, Italian food, Mexican food, and you get home and the next you notice that yes, restaurant, you're drinking more pop, you're drinking more water, or you're drinking more wine, whatever you're drinking more of it because you're thirstier when you eat that kind of food. And then the next day you notice that you're 4, 5, 6, 8 pounds heavier, and you think, I didn't eat 8 pounds of food. How is that possible? How did I gain that much additional weight when the food I ate didn't weigh that much? It's because it's high carbohydrates. Every 94 grams of carbohydrates. So you can just look on the nutritional facts panel of the food that you ate, just add it up. Count them, 94 grams of carbs, not the fiber, subtract the fiber, 94 grams of those carbs, that will include your glucose, your sugars, and complex carbs, right? So just subtract your fiber out of that total, and you'll gain a pound of weight. The reason why is because every one of those glucose molecules will bind with 4 water molecules. And the reason why you're thirsty when you're eating is because that pulls it from everything else. Your body doesn't get to use it. And your body says, well, I guess I need some more water to keep this old body running because Jason keeps on eating more carbs. And those carbs break down into glucose, and that glucose has to bond with water molecule. Get the story? and it holds on to it until you're done processing it out of your body. So during the digestive cycle, you're going to have that extra weight. And that's why you seem like you gain so much extra weight the next day, because 94 grams isn't all that much if you're going to a high carb meal. And then you add on to that another 4 grams. Well, you just do the math. 94, let's just do the math. You do 94 times 4, you got 376. You have right there a pound, right? So it's easy for you to see that extra weight on the scale. But don't worry, it's not fat. It's just glycogen. It's just water weight. It'll fall off unless you continue to eat those extra carbs like that on a daily basis. Then that will be converted to fat. But if you want to go out and splurge every once in a while, for heaven's sakes, do it. It'll come right back off. All right. Whew. We just did a little bit. I dove a little bit deeper into that. I'm sorry. So that's why we like this molecule. And now if we manipulate it a little bit, we'll take this cyclodextrin molecule that has kind of a little bucket right there on the left that has the chemical structure, the backbone, if you will. And then over on the right side, you'll see that it's hydrophilic on the outside and hydrophobic on the inside. And that means that it's going to attract on the outside and repel on the inside. And so as it grabs that fat molecule, all right, the water will stay on the outside and the fat will be sucked in the inside of that cyclodextrin. When that happens, that means that your digestive enzymes are not able to break it down and digest it. So our fat is in there. Our foods taste like they have fat in them because they do have fat in them. But they also have another magical chemical, natural chemical, a natural fiber called the cyclodextrin. Now we have used, like I told you, we use a different one. We have to because we bake our foods and something changes in the chemistry of that. But the fats are in there. It just doesn't allow your digestive enzymes to break down that fat and that carbohydrate to be used for energy, right? That's why they taste so darn good, right? It's important to note that the ingredient, our fat blocker, does not change fat or carbs, right? It's just this cohesion relationship between the two molecules, the cyclodextrin and the host, right? The host being fat or being a carbohydrate, whatever we're trying to block. And if you want to do more research, just go type in weak van der Waals force, right? VANDERWAALS, right? And it talks about that'll talk about this is real science. I think we learned that in the late 1800s, right? So it basically enables a guest molecule, it being a fat or a carbohydrate, to be liberated again. So that's how they have time release substances, where you can eat it, it passes through your stomach because it's very acidic, and then you let it release. We don't use that one. We use one that's permanent, but you can use that for great efficacious natures, all right? Let me show you an example of something that you can actually do at home, right? So this is the lab that I'll explain a little bit more later, but the water is blue. If you look in the middle under, say, 12.5%, where it has that label, that white stuff is fat, okay? Now go clear over on the right side, you'll see that there is these little white stuff at the bottom of the vials. That's extra fat blocker. I mean, it didn't have fat to go bond to because there wasn't enough fat in the sample, all right? So this is a common example of how it can be used. So this is normal stuff, right? It can be used in water. It can be used in oil. It doesn't matter. It's compatible with both of them. But let's get into some proof, right? That's what everybody wants. How does the scientific community feel about what I'm talking about? Do they embrace it? Do they support it? Is Jason out on a wild crusade on his own, and he didn't have any friends backing him up. Well, let's check and see. Here's one clinical study. Now, this was actually a study done by the European Union, or what they call the European Commission, and they have certified and proven the health benefits of cyclodextrin, and they even allow a permanent, should I say, a permitted health claim on the label. So if you have it in a product and you put that on the label, you can make this health claim. You don't get to do that in the United States. The EU opinion confirms that cyclodextrin can reduce the spike in blood sugar that follows following a starchy meal. What? That's amazing. Now, do they have a different kind in Europe than we have here? Nope. No, we don't. It's the same. We use a slightly different one because, again, we had to modify it so it could be used in baked goods. But there's the reference right there down at the bottom of the screen. If you don't believe me, you can go check that out. Okay. And study number 2. Or basically, this is our manufacturing plant of foods, the shipping department, right? Getting it ready for packaging. This basically means that any manufacturer that uses this in their food can make this health claim. And because the European Union has confirmed that it actually is legitimate. Doesn't sound too crazy to me. I'm not out on a limb. The second study was to identify if cyclodextrin can bind permanently, not letting go, holding it permanently to fats. And they wanted to see by what ratio. Remember when I said that fiber can do that, but it holds it temporarily. It can only do a 1-to-1 ratio. So you have 1 gram of fiber and 1 gram of fat, and they'll bind. But we need more because we can't eat hundreds and hundreds of grams of fiber based on whatever fatty meal we're eating, right? So they went and they proved that it was at 10 times. So 1 gram of cyclodextrin will bond to 10 grams of fat. Now that we can handle, all right? At the University of Wayne State, it was demonstrated that cyclodextrin could bond to complex triglycerides at a rate that is, this one actually was 9.5 times to 1. And there's the study that you can make reference to at the bottom. I'm going to go through these pretty fast. I want to just show that there's more than one. That's why I'm going through them quick, all right? Third, this study was to demonstrate that cyclodextrin is very effective at binding to free fatty acids, all right? More than just one type of fat, and different forms of triglycerides. Now, this one was at a very respected university in China. It involved several different studies that they did, so I gave it all to you so you can check it out for yourself. All right, so let's talk about let me talk about the I gave you that picture. Excuse me. I'm going to go back here for a second so I can explain these vials. Okay, so here we have these vials that I showed you, and in this study what they're trying to do is that they dissolved various amounts of fat blocker in water. The water is colored blue, all right, just so you could see it better. And then just regular vegetable oil was added to each tube, same amount, 4 milliliters, and that was shaken briefly. That's all that they did. The weight of the cyclodextrin relative to the amount of fat ranged from, if you'll see at the top, 0% clear on up to 50%. So that meant that in the tube in the middle, it had that there was 12.5% of cyclodextrin to the 4 milliliters of vegetable oil, right? So it just showed when what they wanted to see is how much percentage was needed to bond to all of the fat, and then what would happen if there was more cyclodextrin than there was fat to bond to, all right? And so you'll see over here in the left side of the slide where there's 0 fat blocker in here that you see all the, I put a red marker of the fat clear up. All of that is fat, that kind of that clearish liquid. Then you go over to the 5%. It blocked about, looks like about 75% of the fat. But now you can still see the kind of the yellowish oil at the top. Then it's 7.5% concentration of fat blocker. There's just a little bit of fat. And then at 10%, it's blocking it completely. At 12.5%, blocking it completely. They add 15%. And then you can tell a little teeny bit of white powder, because that's what cyclodextrin looks like in its raw form. It just looks like a raw powder, or I mean a white powder, kind of like a baking powder, okay? And then they just showed higher doses. And since the cyclodextrin doesn't have any fat to bind to, it just drops to the bottom of the vial, right? Here's the very simple test of how it will bind. Now, when it binds like this, what that means is that it's not available for enzyme action to break down the fat so that you get calories from it. Okay, pretty cool. All right, let's do another study here. I'm trying to pick studies that are slightly different, right? Let me go back to the right screen here. In this study, that first study, it showed that it prevented excess body weight in human samples, all right? Or I mean, human subjects. Blood serum of triglycerides and leptin levels were reduced. There's this one, I love this one. Insulin sensitivity was increased as there was fecal fat excretion. So what that means is that your cells actually started right away becoming more sensitive to insulin, because most of us are insulin resistant, right? Over half of the population is insulin resistant. So when you're insulin sensitive, that's awesome. We want that. Your cells are responding to the insulin, pulling the glucose out of your cells. The fecal fat excretion, that's just scientific talk saying they could prove that there was fat not digested because it showed up in the poo of the subjects. They just call it fecal fat excretion. Kind of nicer way of saying poo. Then they showed that it confirmed that cyclodextrin binds to at least 9 times its own weight in fat. So there's another study that confirmed it. Let's go into study number 4 in the double-blind-sided placebo-controlled clinical trial. You want those. Those are great, right? Eliminates the scientists from handpicking the results, all right? They wanted to see its effect on type 2 diabetes. So they took 47 people, 20 that were on the blocker, and 27 that were not. All right, they were already diagnosed and had been type 2 diabetics. Right. Then they also made sure that none of them could be on a weight loss diet. Okay, they could not be taking any weight loss products or involved in another program. They were only given 1 gram per meal for a total of 6 grams a day. So if they had some snack foods that had some fats in it or some carbohydrates in it, basically all do have one of those 2 in it, right? Unless you're eating raw meat. That give you 1 gram up to a total of 6 grams a day, which isn't very much actually, right? And they were told not to change your eating habits. Just eat like normal and don't exercise, all right? So and the study lasted for 3 months. After that, what they checked, they went through, they wanted to see their weight change, they wanted to see their blood levels, of basically their cholesterol levels, their insulin sensitivity, their leptin levels, and they measured their caloric intake just so they could see how efficient their bodies were at breaking down the foods that they were eating, all right? And what did the study say? All right. So the study showed that in the absence of any coaching, any nutritional counseling whatsoever, they were able to reverse weight gain in the subjects that were taking the blocker. That's pretty cool, right? So they weren't talked into anything. They weren't taught any special tricks. They just had them take that 1 gram up to 6 times a day. Their blood triglyceride levels, their cholesterol levels, their LDL levels, all were reduced in those that took the blocker, all right? Even though people that had elevated triglyceride levels before they started the study, those went down only in the group that took the fat blocker. I shouldn't say fat blocker because it's not just fat blocker, it's the carb blocker too, right? And their HDL levels did go up a little bit. Not a lot, but they did go up. That's the HDL is the great healthy one. Then let's see, their insulin sensitivity was increased. That's awesome. In the controlled group, when I say controlled group, that's the one that took the fat and carb blocker. They were able to have better digestion. They were able to digest and be more efficient at pulling more energy out of the food that they were actually getting, that were being allowed for digestion. It bonded at 9.7 to 1. There's another confirming study that shows that it can do many times its weight. The wolves that took the fat and carb blocker felt more satisfied for a longer period of time. And they found that those people were just on their own eating less calories. They weren't told to, they just did because they were, why? They were satisfied for longer. And there were absolutely no negative side effects whatsoever. Okay. What was the conclusion of the study? They said that the cyclodextrin is effective at reducing or maintaining body weight in obese patients that have type 2 diabetes in the absence of any energy intake reduction, I mean any diet, or increase of exercise program. This is pretty cool, all right? Cholesterol and triglycerides levels were both reduced in the patients that took the study. That took the fat and carb blocker, and their body fat levels actually went down for the 3-month period of time. Their insulin sensitivity went down. Their secretion went down, but their sensitivity grew greater. That was better. There's that study. You can check it out. Read it for yourself. Let's move on to study number 5. What other new things did we discover? Well, they did in these rats. They call them LDLR KO mice, right? And the idea, there's the study down at the bottom. The idea of this study were to randomize, put them on a westernized diet, like the foods that most Americans eat. The test diet was identical to the control group, so both parts of the animals, and the amount that they were given. So the same type of food and the same amount was given to both groups. They were given food and water. Blood samples were collected at week 2, 5, 10, and week 14, right? So it was a 14-week study. And then they had 25 mice, and then let's check and see what they did. They only put in 10% of the fat and carb blocker in the diet of fat. So they only measured the fat in the foods that they were giving, and then they gave 10% of the blocker mixed right in. And let's check and see what happened. So here's all the benefits. Now, one thing, their weight didn't change between the two groups, but that's okay because that wasn't the part of the study. That wasn't what they were trying to identify. They wanted to do blood samples, right? There was no difference in the food that was consumed in the two groups. The test group showed a significant decrease in plasma levels of cholesterol by 15.5%, their total cholesterol by 20%, the esters by 14%, the triglycerides were down by 23%, total fatty acids were 17% down. There was significant changes in all of their fatty acid profiles. And then they even broke down, and that's when you look down there and you see the C17 to 1, that's identifying the type of fat that's in the bloodstream. So if you go down to the second bullet point from the bottom, the second one from the bottom, you'll see a C18-2, right? That's one of the ways you can show that the type of fat it is. Right below is C24. That's commonly an omega-6, okay? And an omega-3 would be a C22.6. Now, those are kind of confusing for the public, so they just instead call them omega-6 and omega-3. But those were increased. Those are the ones that we want. The other ones we want to suppress, like the trans fats and things like that. So those were being bonded, and there was a significant 30% or 29% decrease in the LDL, the VLDL, and the IDL. This is great research that's done to show the effectiveness of this blocker that we use in study number 6. All right, this one was a talking specifically about blocking carbohydrates, glucose. Right, it was a double-blind, randomized crossover study. We love those again, and to measure blood insulin and glucose levels at zero fat carbohydrates. So what they did is they took zero fat, even though they're giving them fat blockers, and they gave them rice. And just rice, and then gave them to the people. There were 5 males and 5 females, and there were 50 grams of food in the rice. It was just regular boiled rice, and they gave them different doses, 0 in one group, and they gave 2 grams and 5 grams and 10 grams in these groups. Right, there was 5 in each one of those groups, 5 people. And afterwards, what they found was that it significantly reduced blood glucose levels. And what are we really trying to achieve is lower insulin levels. So after just one treatment, they showed that the insulin levels reduced by 10%, right? This is significant. It showed that they didn't like the taste of the rice and the cyclodexian mixture, and they got those that had the higher concentration got a slightly minor gastrointestinal discomfort. Why is that? Because there was no fat for the fat blocker to bond to, and the taste wasn't good because it can have an effect. That's why we had to create a different type of cyclodextrin. And here are even more studies. So I'm going to let this just stay here for a second so you can take a screenshot or write them down. I'm not trying to hold anything back. I want you to absolutely believe by clinical evidence that this is the real deal, that it really does work. What we had to do is one thing to understand, that what happens is when you hear the word denatured, what that means is that when you take a protein or a carbohydrate and you do something to it chemically, it will denature. It means it'll change its molecular structure. The best example I can give you is just take a fried egg. You've done this so many times. You take an egg, you crack it open, you put it on the pan, and you'll see that clear fluid, right? That is pure protein, right? And then you cook it. What happens to that clear substance? It changes white, and it's no longer runny. It forms into a mass that holds together. That is a perfect example of how protein will denature. Essentially, what's happening to the protein is folding over the protein. The amino acids in the protein are folding over on itself, and that's what changes it. And it can't change back. If you cool the egg back down after you cook it, does it change back to where it was when you first popped it out of the egg? Nope. it stays the same. It's a permanent change. That's an example of what happens to carbohydrates and proteins when they're heated up. Oil or fats don't have that problem. That's why we can use them when we're baking. That's why you take some butter and you put it in a pan, it turns runny, you put it back in the fridge, and then it goes solid again. Okay, so fat, we don't have that problem with it denaturing. What we found out is that when we just took regular cyclodextrin and put it into the food, it didn't taste good. It didn't taste right. It had what these people in the study experienced. But also, more importantly, is after we tested the fecal matter, we found out that it wasn't blocking carbs or fat. And it's because, after further study, is that when you bake, you heat it up, the carbohydrates and proteins will denature, and it has a chemical response to how they affect with the cyclodextrin. And that's why we use that different form. It's a form that we created, modified to make it basically heat tolerant, so that you can put it in and have it in our muffins. You can have it in our pizza. You can have it in any of the substances that have been treated. And so this reference, or this presentation that I gave you, was really more about, I didn't want to just have you believe me smile and me be charming. Not that I can be charming, but just have me talk you into it, because I tell a good story. I wanted to give you, I know maybe it was a little boring with listening to some clinical studies, but I wanted you to get a clear sense that there are many studies that have been done that prove that this works. This is real life. It happens in the real world, and we just made it into a functional source. We modified it. We've checked the fecal matter, we've checked the blood, and it works now. We did that 10 years ago. And so feel confident in the research that we give, but also demand it. Don't ever let us get off the hook. Always make sure that we're not trying to pull the wool over your eyes. I can promise that I won't. That's my commitment. But how do you know? Do what Reagan did. Reagan trusted the Russians that they would disarm, and we would reduce our stockpiles in both countries and reduce the risk of nuclear war. But what was that famous phrase that he used? Trust and then verify. So I ask you to trust me, but only trust me so far, and then verify that what I'm telling you is absolutely correct. And do that same measure with everybody else. Thank you for your time. Feel confident in that our technology, when we tell you that our corn chips are low carb and fat free, we test it, we use solid science, you can rely on that. So thank you again. Appreciate you. Love you. Want to keep you healthy. Want to get you healthy. And hopefully you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Be careful going to the rest of the holiday. We're going to talk about from now to the rest of the new year, little tricks that you can do to not put on those extra pounds that, well, us Americans seem to. See you later. Take care. Appreciate you.